Today we're going to build the perfect Minecraft diamond keyboard. Step 1 is to get everything out of the box and prepped for assembly. Step 1A is breaking down the keyboard. If you are using this straight out of the box and are just popping switches and caps to the board, congrats, you don't have to do any of this stuff. It's just us crazy folks that are into customizing. We get the extra homework. Step 2 will be to prep the case for painting. I found an awesome diamond colored spray paint from my local hardware store. Combined that with the keycaps, I think this is really going to turn into our best board yet. For this one, we'll paint both the plate and the case of the keyboard. I am kind of nervous about a single colored keyboard. I don't know that I've made one of those before, but full steam ahead. We have to start this part off by scuffing up the plastic to remove all of the manufacturer protective coating. If you don't do this, you will have problems with your paint adhering because oddly enough, your plastics aren't designed to have paint or other stains put on top of them. Who knew, right? Once scuffed up, we'll apply a few layers of primer to both parts in order to pave the way for a successful painting later on. Step 3 will find us working on the stabilizers, literally my least favorite part of any build. Because this is a diamond build, we are going to use fancier stabilizers this time around. We're not using iron stabilizers. We're using genuine Durock V2 stabs. I'm really glad we did this because the factory lube on the included stabilizers wasn't terrible, but it was bad enough that we would have had to have fixed that before moving on anyway. We'll also be adding some tape to the plate where the stabilizers go in to make them sound even better because we want to reduce the wobble as much as possible. We aren't there yet though. That's after the paint is dry. The paint's still drying, like, as we speak. Next up, we won't be lubing these holy pandas because part of gaming keyboards, especially a diamond Minecraft keyboard, is that glorious clack. But we will be filming each of them to make them sound a little bit better. Now it's time to get back to the super sophisticated painting studio that's not just a sheet of plywood in my garage. The primer looks good and dry, so let's hit this up with some of that good old diamond colored spray paint. This is already looking amazing and we still need to do a few more coats. So we'll turn this over and get to the top of the case as well. Once the paint is totally dry, we can add that little bit of sticky tape or adhesive bandages to where the stabilizers will mount to the plate. Like I said, this will reduce a ton of the stabilizer wobble, thereby ensuring that the proper respect is paid to this diamond Minecraft keyboard. We've got the top of the board totally taken care of. Now we need to work on sound treating the case. There are two things we need to do to the case to make it sound better. We need to add density and weight. Two things that can quickly and efficiently be solved by adding a bunch of goopy silicone to the bottom. If you have the time, it only takes a couple of minutes to mix and pour this, so you just give it some time to rest, and this can take even the hollowest sounding boards and make them sound fantastic. Whew, okay, and we are in the studio. Everything is prepped and ready to go. The board has its silicone all dried and rubberized. We've got the plate, the PCB. Let's put it all back together. First step of putting all this back together is we need to secure the plate and the PCB back to whence they came. I remember a few months ago when I first started doing this, the paint wouldn't be evenly applied. It would just have a bunch of globs and it would run and be bad. And we would do crazy things and then we would have to sand it all off. So now that it's all looking great and working well together, I'm getting really happy about these boards. Okay, we've got the PCB and the plate back together. Now we will put them into the case itself. And I love this silicone stuff. Like, instead of having to tape a bunch of stuff down or doing anything, it just fills all the spaces where you need that density and you want the hollowness taken away. It works so well and it's not that expensive. There we go. Got it. This is the ultimate Minecraft keyboard. It's gonna be so good. This time we had time to actually let the paint dry all the way so we don't have like weird fingerprint problems or anything like that. It's just, this is the board. I know I say it every week, but we get better every week. It's like every board we make is the best board we've ever made. Okay, plate and PCB are fully attached back to the board and that looks, oh, it looks good. Listen to this. Like that. It's not hollow anymore. It's got some good density to it. Okay, now let's pop in the switches. Ho ho ho! There we go. That looks so good. How does it sound? That sounds fantastic already. I already can tell how amazing that sounds. Okay, now we got to get the keycaps on. Okay, and we have now built the perfect Minecraft diamond keyboard. That looks incredible. If you were to see this keyboard sitting on somebody's desk, you would absolutely think, is that made out of Minecraft diamonds? It looks fantastic. It feels great. I'm really, really happy with how this turned out, but we got to see how good it sounds. Well, not see, but you know what I mean. That sounds incredible, but not only does it sound incredible, those holy pandas make it feel incredible too. Like it's an enjoyable click of typing. Building the Quietest keyboard for 25 bucks means we have to make some compromises. The biggest one being, we need to start with a pre-built board and tear it all down, because it's really hard to find even useful keycaps for $25. We will start with this eUso Z88 that I found for $12.59 on Amazon. It's got acceptable keycaps and even hot swappable switches, which legitimately surprised me when I opened up the box. I really thought that a board of this price would have everything soldered down. I even had the good old desolderer on standby. But good on you, eUso. I think the most economical way to get the best performance here is to take what we've got and make it better. It's not like we could totally replace everything internally or even anything internally. $17 doesn't get you very far in the world of custom mechanical keyboards. And a quick aside, because I can't let this go, holy crap, do I really like the base version of this board. For $12, you get reasonable keycaps, hot swappable switches, decent sound, and a removable USB-C cable. I wasn't planning on being this impressed with the base board for this video, but dang. Luckily, we were able to get the version of the eUso with Otemu red switches. Having these linear pre-stage as our switches for this build should go pretty darn far towards making this as quiet as possible. So let's take these suckers apart and start the lubing process. I've got a small tub of G-Lube left over, so using a complicated math technique called eyeballing it, I'll consider this like 1/20th of the cost of a full container, so we will add $2.80 to our total for this build. Personal note from one keyboard fan to another, I really hate opening Otemu switches because I have to use the other side of my switch opener and my claw cracker just straight up won't work. The claw cracker is like 50% of why I even open switches in the first place. It's so sad. That crack is so satisfying. We do have some wiggle room left in the budget, so let's add switch film to these as we're closing them up. We need to add about half a container of film that will increase our bill by $4.96. We're getting pretty far into our budget here, and we are getting close to our limit, but don't count our wallet out yet. I think it can still get us some really cool stuff before we're done. Let's move over to the stabilizers. Pretty easy here, just takes a little bit of work to disassemble, lube, and grease these up to enjoy their life on this board. I am going to lube these a little more aggressively than I normally would, because the point of the board isn't necessarily to have the best feeling typing experience, it's to be the quietest, and those two aren't always the same thing. I wasn't initially planning on this, but because we're this far into the build and we still have some money left over, we need to make this thing even quieter by painting it. It's science. Just like racing stripes make your car faster, a more subdued paint job will make your keyboard quiet. You can't argue with me. Them's the facts. To do this proper, we're gonna need both primer and the spray paint. So we'll factor in 1/3 of a can of both, which will cost $1.50 for the primer and $2.37 for the paint, bringing us pretty well right in line with our budget. So first up, you gotta scuff up the board if you want the paint to hold, and we will get the primer set to go. I was only going to paint the case and leave the plate alone, but the sparkliness of the plate was just too loud. It was too loud, I could hear it over the spray paint, so it needs to be subdued a little bit too. Once the paint is totally dry, we still need to fix one of the biggest culprits in noise, the case itself. Unfortunately, we've run out of money for anything fancy like a silicone pour or any other fancy additions, so we'll do a standard mod that I've done in the past and just fill this sucker full of very dense duct tape called gaffer's tape. It's got enough weight and heft that it should add enough density to the case to keep us from having any sort of hollowness while we type. I don't know how much of a roll of gaffer's tape we actually used, but it's almost nothing, so let's arbitrarily call it 70 cents. When we add the next 7 cents, that it brings us all to $24.99, because that's kind of like the keyboard that you would find on the Home Shopping Network. We do have half a Band-Aid left over from a previous build, so let's use that on the plate where the switches fit in to make sure they have zero wobble. If we've gone through the problem to make sure the switches themselves don't make noise, we can at least keep them in place. That half of an adhesive bandage comes out to a grand total of 7 cents, again bringing us to $24.99 and well under budget. Whew, okay, and we are back. Everything's dry, everything's ready to go. Let's assemble this and see just how quiet of a keyboard we were able to make sure that we were able to build the quietest keyboard for $25. I think the spray paint turned out amazing. I was thinking when I bought the spray paint that it was going to be a little more darker, but as you can see here, it's kind of like an industrial gray. Like it looks like unpolished steel almost. I love how this looks, by the way. It looks incredible. It's still kind of sparkly, so while it's not pink and sparkly anymore, it's kind of like gray and sparkly. Boom, check that out. That came together real nice. Feels pretty solid. I do wish we had had enough money in the budget to do silicone. Silicone just makes all of this stuff sound the absolute best, so it is disappointing that we don't have that, but the gaffer's tape will sound good enough, I hope. Let's pop the switches in here and get to it. Boom, and the switches are in. That is gonna sound so good. It's gonna be a very darn quiet little $25 keyboard. Okay, let's pop the keycaps on. Okay, we now have the board all put back together, and I gotta tell you, I don't hate it. I thought I was really gonna dislike these keycaps combined with the gray background. I was gonna spray paint the keycaps too, but I didn't really know how I was gonna be able to spray paint them all. So I'm really happy with how this turned out. But we're talking about the quietest keyboard. Now, this is what it sounded like without any of the modifications we did today. Okay, now let's see how this sounds. Honestly, I think it sounds really good. There's a few switches in here that sound like they're not agreeing with the film. So if I were to do this all over again, I probably would not have included the film on these. They work better on the Cherry MX switches. I have had problems with films on Otemu in the past, but I think this turned out pretty darn good. Can we take $75 and turn it into a totally awesome keyboard? Let's find out. I like building these budget boards and giving you the best opportunity to make it yourself, so let's go to Amazon to do that. We should find something pretty easily. So right here, this is standing out to me right here, the CIY GK68. This looks like a hot swappable keyboard for $37.90. All right, then we're gonna need some switches. Milky yellow, hey, I like that. Can we find that for any cheaper? I've never used yellow. Here we go. Gateron Milky Yellow switches, 23 bucks. Milky Yellows? It sounds gross though. Milky Yellow? Ugh, hopefully they sound good, but it sounds gross. And then for some keycaps, IAOI, PBT 60% keycaps, 61 keycaps, $10 for keycaps, plus $24 for switches, $37.90, 38 bucks for the board, $72. We've even got a few dollars left over. But thankfully, through the magic of video editing, here are the parts right here. It's almost like we planned this out ahead of time. Unboxing the keyboard, we can see that it's a pretty bare bones kit. We don't even get a cable included. Thankfully, it is a wireless keyboard, does come with a wireless dongle, but personally, I always have a wire attached from my keyboard to my computer. We do get a combination keycap and switch puller and a little keyboard broom. I've never seen anything like this with a keyboard before, and it might be the most adorable accessory that I've ever gotten. Seriously, I love it. The keycaps are about as quality as you'd expect from this price point and from a set that shows up jumbled into one little box, but they do look like they'll work, and I kind of like the black and red scheme. Also, the Gateron Milky Yellow switches are new to me, but once we get these prepped, lubed, and installed, they should sound and feel fantastic. First up, let's disassemble a case and see what we are really working with. I'm really impressed with the setup here. They included both a nice little rubber layer between the PCB and the plate, and even included a small amount of foam on the bottom. I'm not sure that it will do much in the long run, but it's nice to see that they tried. One thing that I don't like after we've cracked it open is I don't like that there is no USB-C at all. There's no USB, period. We will have to use the included wireless dongle, and we will need to source some AAA batteries when we go to use this. All we're really going to do today is hit the top plate with a little bit of red paint to really bring out the color of these keys. We don't want to overdo it on the paint, but because this top metal plate does already have sort of a coating on it, we'll do a couple initial layers of primer to make sure that the paint really holds. While this is drying, let's get up to the next part, lubing the switches. For this, we'll crack everything open and begin applying some G-lube to the moving parts. My philosophy on lubing switches is less is more, and much like any mechanical systems, we really only need to focus on the parts that will actually come into contact with each other. Thankfully, I found a new hour-long explanation of my favorite TV show of all time, and I've been saving watching it for this specific scenario. And it's so nice to be lubing Gatoron switches again. Those Otemu from the last few builds were fine, but they were really killing me, as I don't have the tools to open them as easily as I do Gatoron. Next up, let's take care of the stabilizers. I think this time I'm going to go a little easier on the dielectric grease, because last time we did this, I absolutely went overboard. That's because we were running out of time, you know. Needing to sand off a bad hydro dip job will do that to you. I'm also very thankful that these are not pre-lubed from the factory. The last two modifications I've done involved Keychron boards, and while those boards are great by themselves, Keychron way overdoes the factory lube job, and it just makes everything a huge mess. Here, we'll lube up the housing, hit the bars with some grease, and we're basically good to go. Everything is looking so good at this point. Checking back on the top plate, we can go ahead and apply that red paint. I decided to go with Candy Apple Red, because if it's good enough for Iron Man, it's good enough for us. Back to the main case, I want to help out with the hollowness I already know is going to happen because of this being a cheap case. And today we're going to try something new. We're going to mix and pour silicone into this board. It should add some much needed heft and make it sound so much better. There should be no hollowness because it's going to be mostly filled up with rubber. You simply take the two parts, mix them in a cup, and pour it into the case. I did add some gaffer's tape to places where I think the goop might escape, so hopefully we'll be all good. As one thing starts drying, another is finishing drying, so let's hit that top plate with a nice matte clear coat to finish out the painting, and thankfully, we didn't ruin anything about the paint this time around. It's the small victories. Whew, okay, we've got everything prepped and ready to go. The silicone is cured. The paint looks fantastic. I think it's going to look really good with the keycaps. There's just one more thing we kind of got to prep really quickly. When we did the silicone, you'll see that we taped some things off so we didn't get it to leak out, but it did kind of cover up the on-off switch. So let's kind of cut a spot out for that real quick, and then we should be good to get everything else assembled and ready to go. I'm very excited. I think this keyboard is going to turn out amazing. Okay, boom. Coming together really well. I was kind of nervous that that would not fit in there. Fit everything in there. We need to get the stabilizers on there. Sounds good, looks good. The only thing that kind of sucks about doing paint jobs like this, you do have to be a little careful with the stabilizers as you're putting them back on because they can absolutely scratch your paint. But once you get them on, you can't really tell anyway. I mean, see, check that out. The board totally back together. Man, that looks so good. Obviously, I thought the white and the red were going to look good together, or I would not have designed the board this way, but it looks so much better than I thought it was going to. Okay, boom, look at that. That is a dense, like that really gives it some heft when you add that silicone. I'm really impressed by that. And we had one left over. How lucky is that? Man. That already sounds so good. Okay, let's start these. Okay, so executive decision made. I hate these keycaps. So you can see that we physically built the board with all the parts, but I hate these keycaps and I refuse to make a board with these on it because they're straight garbage. So no, do not buy these keycaps, but I'll overlay a different set of keycaps that you could buy that will work with this, that will keep us on budget. And it does not look exactly like what I wanted, but it still looks pretty good. So let's see, you know, the most important part of a keyboard build is we've done all this stuff. How does it sound? So everything sounds pretty good. If I were to totally redo this again, I'd probably work a little bit more on the spacebar stabilizer. There's still a little bit of sound there. Maybe if we added some tape to the plate or the PCB itself, it would sound a little bit better. The GMMK2. An update to the wildly popular original that looks to make it better in every single way. It's a simple starter board that should give plenty of value and be very easy to set up. But that's not what we're here for. We're here today to make the loudest quiet version of the GMMK2. That might sound crazy, but that's good. We are crazy here. Obviously, for the build itself, we'll be basing this off of a brand new GMMK2 bare bones kit. We're using new to me silent switches and some overly loud keycaps with an overly loud paint scheme. See, that's the loud and the quiet part. It's genius. Speaking of two-tone for the case, let's get that prepped for painting. Step one is to break the entire board down. We need to crack this thing open and get every single piece we can out of here. We definitely don't want to get primer and spray paint on the PCB. Probably wouldn't work at that point. Step two is to move the top plate and case to my professional level spray painting studio. You also might have one. It's called my garage. But what makes mine professional is the broken cardboard box that I use to hold everything. We should probably, as part of a character of this channel, we should name that cardboard box at some point. This is absolutely one of the most enjoyable parts of the whole build for me because of how therapeutic it is to scuff up and totally deface what the manufacturer wanted the board to originally look like. For color combinations today, I think we're gonna go for a glossy blue, matte white combination. I've already got those colors on hand, which saves me from needing to drive to the hardware store again. I assume my local hardware store thinks that I'm up to no good because of how much spray paint I buy. Now, conventional wisdom says you can't mix glossy and matte color combinations because conventional wisdom is all about making loud things loud and quiet things quiet. But we're mixing that up today. Conventional wisdom can go somewhere else. You're not wanted here. While the primer dries, we need to get the most important part of any board done, taking care of the stabilizers. I was going to put on a fancy set of stabs for this build, but I think keeping it as much of the bare bones kit together as possible is pretty important to show how well this board can really work for anybody. So a pretty simple lube dielectric grease drill, and these are good to go. They did come lubed from the factory, but they weren't too bad. I know that sounds counterintuitive to not want that, but this saves a ton of time because I've yet to really come across a decent factory lube job. Normally you have to spend more time fixing what the factory did than just taking care of the stabilizers on your own. So we'll set these aside and head back outside to start with the actual painting. When we started painting, I changed my mind about the color of the board. I liked the thought of the blue and the white, but that wasn't loud enough for me. So we're doing orange and blue. It's like the Castlevania colors. If you ever played Castlevania, orange and blue are opposites, so that should make it as loud as scientifically possible. The paint is yet again drying, so let's head back to the lubing station called my office desk and start getting the switches sorted. I can't get over how cool these switches look, and even before lubing them, they sound pretty darn good. You can buy them pre-lubed from GMMK, but I didn't because there is just something therapeutic about lubing switches. I wouldn't want to do it for a full-time job, but twice a month for these videos, it's been nice to just shut my brain off and watch an overly long video essay about a game that I'm never gonna play. It was kind of hard to shut the old brain off this time because these switches were a huge pain in the butt to get open. You couldn't use the claw cracker. They were almost like Otemu, but not. They were just a pain in the butt. After 2 hours of learning about the in-depth lore of a video game where magic and technology combine, let's go quickly hit the case and plate with some clear coat so we can get the rest of the components ready. Whew, okay, and we are back in the studio and we've got everything prepped for reassembly. I'm really excited. This color turned out so good. I know I say that every week, but holy crap. I was really scared about when I made the switch to orange and blue, but that is about as loud as a keyboard's ever gonna get. So let's start reassembling this darn thing. I think this board has been fantastic for all of the cool stuff you get with it. Like, you get all sorts of good little pieces and parts for this, if I can remember how they all go back together. Might be nice. There we go. Okay, there we go. You get foam, you get weights, you get all sorts of stuff. Like, normally, if you are a regular viewer of this channel, you'll know that I really like doing silicone pores and I like stuffing the case full of, you know, whether it's tape or whatever, to make sure that it sounds as dense and not hollow as possible, because this is what a hollow board sounds like. Even that doesn't sound terrible. Like, this is not even, without anything else, it doesn't sound awful. But then you get all of these weights put in, and it's just next level incredible. Like, here, you're gonna listen to this. The hollowness is taken care of before we've done anything. If that's not incredible, I don't know how else to impress you. That's the coolest part. Let's get this back on here, make sure we can actually plug it in when we are all good to go. If we can't use it, then there's no point in building it. And just apologies right off the bat if you hear some outside noises. My neighbors have started adding an addition to their house, and I thought I had started recording during the workers' lunch break, but apparently they are now back much sooner than I anticipated. So if you hear it, I apologize. Hopefully it won't be too distracting. Boom, look at that. Like, we didn't have to do a silicone pour. We didn't have to add tape. And this is already the most dense sounding board I think I've ever come across on this channel. That sounds so incredible. Look, we even get case foam. This is gonna be like an IKEA desk where we might have a few extra pieces left over at the end because we did not totally put it back together, because I don't know if you know this, but recreating a keyboard on camera is much harder than just doing it at your office at your leisure. There we go. Stabilizers are back in. I love having all of this stuff just included. I didn't have to resource any of this myself. All I had to do today was get the spray paint. As somebody that builds a lot of keyboards, if you wanted to get all of these pieces and parts by yourself and you bought it from, you know, a more reputable place or a higher end place, like all of this stuff together, I think is gonna cost you more than just this kit by itself. So there we go. We've got the plate and the PCB back together. Now we have to plug it in, or it will not work. Ask me how many times I've forgotten to plug the PCB back into the USB-C daughter board. The answer is more than I'm willing to admit to here on a YouTube video. Ho ho, that looks phenomenal. So good. Okay, don't get too excited, Gary. Let's actually see how this looks once it's all screwed down and official. That looks so good. Holy crap, team. Look at that. I'm kind of speechless. I'm really impressed with how good these keyboards have been turning out over the last couple of weeks. That's gonna be a super quiet board. All right, next step, let's pop all of the switches on here. Boom, and everything. Oh, that sounds so good. I am really happy with how this is turning out so far. But okay, keycaps next. Okay, boom, that is the keyboard assembled, and I think you're gonna have a hard time saying that this is not the loudest keyboard. I think this is the loudest keyboard that I've ever owned or seen, and I think it looks great. Feels incredible. It feels so substantial, but okay, how does it sound? That might be the quietest keyboard I've ever built. That sounds incredible. Those silver silent switches are so nice to type on. That is no joke. This is probably going to become my main keyboard from now on. And if you like this video, click here to watch me build the quietest keyboard for $25. Thanks for watching.